Welcome to Wednesday's edition of COVID-19. We remain well above the 400 level today as authorities seek to discourage the spread of the virus and encourage public inoculation against it. We have more on these efforts lined up after the global pandemic updates with our Kwon. Now, so I hear Korea has recorded 100 more infections on this Wednesday compared to Tuesday's tally.
Right, Sunny, quite a surge there. So the drop in daily cases we had on the first 2 days of the work week did not last long, with 469 infections reported this Wednesday. And that also led to a rise in domestically transmitted cases, which are now standing at around the mid-400s. And if we take a look at our daily developments here, we are seeing not a change, almost the same figure compared to last Wednesday. And as you can see, 400s are still dominating daily tallies. And by region, the capital, Seoul, now again has risen back to the triple digits with 120 new infections. No big change in Gyeonggi-do province. And also here, Gyeongsang-namdo province is dealing with rising cases due to cluster infections there at public use facilities. So it is a struggle to get these numbers down, and especially with warmer weather conditions, apparently more people are spending their times outside their homes. In fact, according to health authorities, movement across the nation has risen by 6.8% last weekend from the previous weekend. Now, almost 97,000 people here in the country have now been infected with the virus, and that's roughly 1 out of 500 citizens. And out of those, some 88,800 people have made a recovery. And it is good to see that more than 500 people have made such a recovery in just a day. Health officials this Wednesday, however, stress they address the need for medical, economic, and psychological support measures for former patients. Also stressing that the World Health Organization and local experts all believe that there is no concern of recovered patients to additionally transmit the virus to other people after making a full recovery. Nevertheless, these former patients are struggling with difficulties within the society.
Demanding negative PCR test results from recovered workers, forcing them to work from home, or making them quit their job are all unjustified discriminations against COVID-19 survivors.
Now let's also get an update on the vaccination front. We have a total of over 621,000 vaccinations, with some 18,000 completed a day ago.
I see. Meanwhile, so I hear findings showed vaccinated pregnant women may offer protection to their newborns from COVID-19.
Right, Sunny. According to research in Israel, which is, as we know, the country which has completed the highest number of vaccinations by population, antibodies were detected in 20 pregnant women that were administered with Pfizer vaccines. And in the U.S., also the first pregnant woman gave birth to a baby reportedly with antibodies. And over in Western France now, concerns are mounting over a new variant that was found in Brittany, which has not been found to be more transmittable, but more difficult to detect. And over resurgences concerns in Paris, officials are now looking for stronger containment measures. Let's take a look at the figures now in France here. 4.1 million cases and almost 30,000 new infections reported in just a day. And also resurgences in Brazil with over 84,000 new cases. Also, the Czech Republic has, again, new cases at above 10,000. And also, we are seeing an overall increase in infections around the globe as we're now in the middle of the work week, with over 462,000 new infections and also more than 10,000 new fatalities. And those are the updates I have for now. I'll see you back on Thursday, as we do not have afternoon briefings on Wednesday. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, so thank you. I'll see you tomorrow. Right now, for more details on the local inoculation drive and related news, I have our Kim Han-il here in the studio. Welcome, Hannah.
Good afternoon.
Right then, let's begin with the latest on our vaccination campaign.
Sure. So today marks the 19th day of the COVID-19 vaccination program, and over 621,000 people have received their first dose as of midnight today. This is up by 18,000 people from yesterday, and 1.2% of Korea's total population have now received their first doses. Among those who have been vaccinated to date, close to 588,000 have received the AstraZeneca vaccines, and over 33,000 have been inoculated with the Pfizer vaccines. An additional 252 cases of adverse reactions were reported yesterday, with the majority of them involving common side effects. The rate of adverse reaction stands at 1.45%, meaning less than 2 in 100 people have experienced mild to moderate reactions after getting vaccinated.
Right. Meanwhile, Hannah, authorities here have addressed concerns over in Europe over the safety of AstraZeneca vaccines. Please tell us more.
Sure. So Korean health authorities said that they found no direct correlation between the AstraZeneca vaccines and blood clots reported in some patients. And their current assessment of the vaccine remains unchanged. Take a listen.
The evidence and data that we reviewed last week haven't changed at this point. AstraZeneca vaccines have been administered to more than 300 million people, and no causal links have been established between the vaccines and the reports of blood clots in some recipients.
The European Medicines Agency backed the AstraZeneca vaccine in a press briefing yesterday, saying there is no indication that vaccines were at the root cause of these conditions. During a government briefing yesterday, top health official Park Yong-jun said Korea is keeping a close eye on the Thursday meeting, which will be held by the European Medicines Agency, where it'll announce the findings of its investigation into the vaccine and any further actions that may be required. AstraZeneca vaccines have been put on hold in many countries across Europe and the world as a precautionary measure.
All right, Hannah, just one more question before you go. I believe teachers instructing children at schools here will receive their vaccines earlier than planned.
Yes, so earlier this week, the government revised its vaccination schedule for the first half of the year, including new teachers and staff, those working with young children. Authorities announced that teachers at preschool or daycare centers, as well as teaching students with special needs, first and second graders, have been included in the list of people to be vaccinated by June this year. This group was not part of the original priority listing announced in January, but due to the reopening of schools in March and the expansion of in-person learning, the government decided to get school teachers inoculated in order to also protect young children by extension. Other groups that have been moved ahead in the vaccination line include essential workers such as law enforcement personnel, military service members, and firefighters. Plus, international flight attendants were also bumped up on the priority list since they are more at risk of COVID-19 through frequent overseas travel and are also exempt from quarantine requirements.
All right, Hannah, as always, thank you very much for the coverage.
Thanks for having me.
Right, staying on the local front, in this next report, we share with you the public perception of COVID-19 vaccination here in the country. Do take a look.
Vaccine hesitancy remains a key challenge to overcome for a world that is on a mission to achieve herd immunity. Surveys show that nearly 40% of unvaccinated adults in France and around a quarter in the US and Germany are not willing to get their COVID-19 shots. By contrast, vaccines have found a warmer reception in Korea, with more than half of the country's adult population saying it is every citizen's public duty to get immunized. In the same survey, nearly 8 out of 10 respondents said they were willing to get their shots so as long as the vaccines are guaranteed to be safe and free of charge. At the same time, however, some 3/4 of the respondents said they were also concerned about possible adverse reactions.
백신 선택의 어떤 선택권을 조금 부여받기를 원하고 있는 것 같습니다. 그렇지만 백신 수급이 전 세계적으로 원활하지 않기 때문에 우리가 최대한 접종할 수 있는 백신을 빠른 시간 내에 접종하는 것이 집단 면역에는 더 효과적입니다.
President Moon Jae-in has sought to assuage the public's anxiety by promising full accountability on the part of the government regarding vaccines and their safety.
국민 한 분 한 분이 모두 코로나로부터 안전할 수 있을 때까지 백신 접종에 만전을 기할 것이며 백신 접종에 적극 협력하여 주실 것을 당부드립니다.
There were also notable differences in how people perceived vaccinations, depending on their age group. Around 90% of those in their 50s and 60s had a favorable attitude towards vaccinations, compared to a little over 70% for people in their 30s. So what are the reasons for this perception gap?
연령이 높은 계층이 상대적으로 고위험군이고 이는 개인들이 평가하는 위험 정도에 따른 것이기 때문에 백신 수용에 대한 이 같은 인구학적 차이는 매우 당연한 결과로 보입니다.
What more can be done to soothe the concerns of people who are reluctant to get vaccinated? Seoul National University Hospital doctors, including its president and some 50 senior staff, chose to lead by example, volunteering to be the first ones inoculated with AstraZeneca vaccines.
근거 없는 불신 또는 불안감을 없애는 게 가장 중요하고 그래야 우리 전 직원들이 맞는데 별 어려움이 없을 거라고 생각하고요. 그러기 위해서 필요하다면 제가 먼저 맞겠다라고 얘기를 했고 아마 그것을 받아들여 준 것 같습니다.
Is there anything more that the government and the general public can do to spur positive changes in vaccine perception?
질병관리청 모바일 홈페이지 이용을 권장합니다. 질병관리청 또한 현재 모바일 홈페이지를 좀 더 직관적이고 효율적인 인터페이스로 개선할 필요가 있습니다. 또한 정보 전달의 주체를 의료원과 과학자 위주로 바꿨으면 합니다. 의료 정보 전달에 관한 한 정치인과 관료는 전면에 나서지 않는 관행을 정착시키면 좋겠습니다.
이러한 접종은 우리가 일상으로 돌아가는 첫 걸음이라고 생각하고 있기 때문에 또 많은 근거를 갖고 있는 제품이고 우리 국민들도 신뢰를 갖고 접종했으면 합니다.
Overcoming vaccine hesitancy is not an option, but a requirement in our efforts to chart a feasible course towards a post-pandemic world.
Elsewhere around the world, the fight against the pandemic is being aggravated by brutality against members of the public by armed forces in Myanmar following a military coup on February 1st. Now, in a bid to better highlight the urgent need for medical support and international attention there, I have Cape Diamond, a journalist in Myanmar, live on the line. Welcome, Cape.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Right, Cape. Now, before we start, do tell us a bit about the reason behind your decision to reveal your identity while sharing with us the situation there in Myanmar.
Well, I believe that I have so many things to share with you and share with the world what's really happening here. And of course, like we can't really be silent. So we really need to tell the people that what's really happening here.
Right, Cape, and we appreciate that, of course. Now, it has been reported that at least 180 people have been killed amid pro-democracy campaigns there. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, it's like the security forces are using the executive force, and it was not just cracking down the protest. It's like killing the people. And I have to say that I'm really sorry. I'm really sad that one of my friends was killed a few hours ago in Yangon, and he was just someone protesting peacefully on the street last night, and he was killed. So it's like, of course, at least 180 people being killed, and these are all, like peaceful protesters. They have no arm, they're not taking arm as well. They're not attacking the security forces. They were just a peaceful protesters, but they've been killed. And at the same time, the military is trying to use as many force as they can. So it's really unfair for the people who are fighting for the democracy.
Right, Cape, that's very shocking. That's also quite sad. Our condolences to your loss, of course. Now, Myanmar police, I hear, have been going door to door at night, hunting for protesters after sealing off streets. What can you tell us about the appalling atrocities against people there by armed forces since they took power early last month, Cape?
Well, it's like now we have the curfew, from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. So that's the time that the armed forces are going door to door to take the people out, like especially the politician, activists, and some journalists as well. So that's really worrying. And of course, they have been taken many activists and many politicians over the few weeks, and some of them were killed, during the interrogation, I have to say. So for the family members, it was very devastating. They have their family members taken, and the next day they got a call from the security forces and say, hey, take the dead body of your family member. I mean, there's no law, So I have to say, rules of law is, we don't have rules of law in Myanmar right now.
I see. Cape, I don't know what to say about that, but there have also been claims that the military is using the pandemic as a political tool. Could you explain this for us?
Well, I mean, we have pandemic since last year, and of course, no international flight, no commercial flight, and no independent investigation teams or delegation can come to Myanmar, and also no journalists from outside being allowed to come here and to report. So that's a good reason that they can do whatever they want, even though they're saying that they're doing in accordance with the law. But I don't think they're doing in accordance with the law. So they're using this pandemic as a tool, for their political playground.
I see. Cape, before you go, is there a message that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, everyone here, especially the people who are fighting for the democracy, who are fighting against the junta, they're this is for not only for them, but also for their next generation. So, and also we have many people who are joining the CDM. So we have to support them. And I think the revolution must succeed.
All right, Cape, thank you for joining us live, and do take care of yourself.
All right, thanks so much for having me.
Right. Meanwhile, back on the pandemic front, as pundits across the world have been saying, proper disposal of medical waste is part of the fight against the pandemic. Now, up next, we share with you such efforts by the National Medical Center here in the country.
The amount of COVID-19 related medical waste generated in the year 2020 alone is about 30 times the amount generated in 2015 when South Korea suffered the MERS outbreak. Well, that amount, needless to say, is enormous. And now the question is it being safely managed? I am at the National Medical Center, and let's check out how medical waste is disposed of. Since January 20th last year, when South Korea reported its first COVID-19 case, over 7,500 tons of COVID-19 related medical waste have been generated from hospitals, treatment facilities, and temporary facilities. How does the National Medical Center manage the COVID-19 medical waste that increased significantly due to the pandemic?
일반적으로 가정에서도 쓰레기를 분리할 때 재활용과 일반 쓰레기를 분리하듯이 의료 폐기물도 다른 폐기물과 섞이지 않게 하는 부분. 오랫동안 쌓아놓게 되면은 감염의 문제가 됩니다. 그래서 의료 폐기물은 저장 장소에 보관해놨다가 그 부분들이 바로 소각장으로 갈 수 있도록 그렇게 시스템이 되어 있습니다.
The first step, all medical waste from the hospital and isolation wards will be collected and moved to the disposal site. So collected medical waste will be stored right behind there. It has been transported using a freight elevator, and once arrives, something called RFID tags, which automatically identifies and tracks each item will be attached to each bag, sharing the real-time information with the Environment Ministry's Hangang Basin Environmental Office. So what are some key things to know when managing this waste?
페이스 쉴드 이거를 착용하고 냉구 마스크 착용하고 LP 가운을 착용하고 장갑도 착용하고 오염이 제 자신에게 감염되지 않게 하기 위해 이렇게 철저히 착용하는 겁니다.
의료 폐기물은 그 예방 수칙을 잘 지키면 그게 기본입니다. 기본대로 움직여주고 감염병 예방 지침에 따라서 안전하게 관리를 한다면.
So medical waste includes various types of contaminated medical equipment, so it can be highly infectious. That's why it is put into medical waste bags and containers for double sealing. In particular, disinfecting these containers before and after all these procedures is a must.
The waste has been collected, then what is the next step?
의료 폐기물은 일반 폐기물과 달리 감염의 우려가 있어서 별도의 소각시설에서 소각 처리되고 있습니다. 이렇게 의료 폐기물만을 소각할 수 있는 소각시설은 전국에 13개소 있습니다. 특정 지역의 의료 폐기물이 과다하게 발생해서 해당 지역에서 처리가 어려울 경우에는 상대적으로 소각 용량의 여유가 있는 의료 폐기물 시설과 연계해서 폐기물이 처리될 수 있게끔 하고 있습니다.
Also, several cutting-edge, non-face-to-face medical waste disposal technologies that are using robots will be developed starting this year.
The amount of medical waste is increasing significantly as the pandemic prolongs. However, as you just saw, every single measure is being taken to prevent any possible COVID-19 transmission, even when managing medical waste. This has been 신세벽.
누적 신고율은 1.4%입니다. 신고율을 보면 성별로는 여성이 2.1%, 남성이 1.0%로 여성이 좀 더 많은 신고를 하셨습니다. 젊은 연령층에서의 이상반응 발생 신고가 더 많았습니다.
The inoculation drive continues here in Korea well into its third week, with more than 620,000 people having received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. And the goal by the end of the second quarter is 12 million people. For more on this plan and related issues, I have Dr. Kim Taek from Institute Pasteur Korea. Welcome back, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
And I also have Dr. Alice Hyung Tan from Ms. Medi Women's Hospital. Good to see you again, Dr. Tan.
Likewise.
Now, Dr. Dan, it appears women and adults in their 20s are more prone to post-inoculation adverse effects. How do you explain this reality?
I think the differential in terms of age and also gender can be explained by the strength of the immune response that we would expect in these different populations. So we know that younger people tend to have stronger immune systems, and so we would expect a higher degree of what we call reactogenicity after a vaccination. Just because you're younger, your immune system is just going to have a more robust response against the vaccine, which is what we want. We want the good immune response. In terms of gender difference, part of it can be explained by the smaller body mass of women compared to men, and yet women are getting the same dose of the vaccine. But also in premenopausal women especially, the effects of estrogen on boosting the immune response can also help to explain what we're seeing. We saw this not just in Korea for AstraZeneca, but also in the US. Similar results were found after vaccination with either the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine, wherein 65% of people who had adverse effects were falling in the 18 to 59 age bracket, and overwhelmingly, 80% of the responders of people who were reporting adverse effects were women in that population as well in the United States. But we see this also in terms of a preponderance of women for vaccinations against other diseases, for example, influenza, yellow fever. And also after the DTP vaccine, women tend to have more reactions compared to men. So this is in line with what we would have expected.
Right, so it's not unnatural or anything. Dr. Kim, I believe researchers in France are investigating claims that a newly discovered coronavirus variant there has evaded standard PCR tests. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, this is pretty much just a new news for the very new news for me. And then we need actually some more information about this the potentially just a new variant. But I think just a conventional PCR test to detect this virus is actually we are actually detecting 3 different just areas of the viral genome. And then I think one of the variant that we are actually just concerned is that variant was not actually detected pretty well in terms of the spike region. This is the where all the variations is just occur. However, but the 2 other regions were actually detected pretty well. But in this case, the French case is pretty unusual because I think based on the information that I have got right now is that all 3 regions actually seems to be not detected pretty well. So the current detection is based on the serology test. So this is bizarre, and I think we need eventually some sequencing analysis of these potentially some variants, the things. But at the same time, we do not know how just serious and also the potential how just dangerous this variant is right now. So we need some more investigation on this part.
Right. And given this relentless discovery of variants, do you suppose that our vaccination may become an annual affair, like the flu vaccine?
Well, I think many experts actually expect that maybe just a coronavirus vaccination would just probably just will be done like some annual flu shot. And I think we need some variant issues as well. But also, according to the some prior study, we have already some endemic coronaviruses like OC43 and 293, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then these viruses is just ongoing just in the human society for many years already. But then even for these endemic coronaviruses, for the same coronavirus, we are witnessing these recurrent infections, which means that we need some the repeated, some annual, or seasonal vaccination for these coronaviruses as well.
I see. Meanwhile, the level of antibodies developed after COVID-19 inoculation is said to differ from person to person. Now, for more on the immunity induced via vaccines, I have Dr. Aldon Venuti live on the line. Welcome, Dr. Venuti.
Good afternoon.
Now, Doctor, do start by telling us a bit about the discrepancy in antibody development among inoculated people depending on their physical traits.
Yes, I would like just to highlight some point of this study, because we did a study on a health worker in my institute. It's a National Cancer Institute. It's 250 people were vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine, and we detect antibody level 7 days after the second doses. The good news is that 99% of vaccinated respond to the vaccine. And the question was that we detect in overweight people low level of antibodies. I want to be clear on this point. We detect low level of antibodies, and this doesn't mean that these people will be at risk of infection by coronavirus. That means that we detect low levels, but we don't have data at the moment about the protection against the virus. So it's something that must be more studied in larger study on with more patients enrolled in the study, particularly to detect the difference between overweight and normal weight people.
I see. So, Dr. Venuti, your study shows that people who are overweight may not produce as many antibodies as those who are leaner. What are the implications of your study then? Yeah,
study must be done on this issue, because this correlation by the overweight and vaccine response was already reported for other vaccine like influenza or rabies vaccine. And this could be linked to some problem that obese people have, because in obese people there is something like a constant low level of inflammation, and this low level of inflammation is detrimental for a valid response against the virus, as you know that in obese people it's reported that COVID disease is worse than in normal weight people, but also against the vaccine. So this could be the reason why we detect the low level of antibody in overweight people in our study. I repeat, our study is limited to 250 people.
I see. Then, do your findings, you suppose, show that people who are obese might need a booster shot to ensure proper protection against COVID-19?
Yeah, I think that if our study will be confirmed by a larger study, it's absolute that vaccination in these people, overweight people, must be tailored by using at least two different approaches that must be carefully studied. One should be increase the doses of the vaccine in sense that the schedule is the same, but it's higher doses of the vaccine in the single injection. Or you can hypothesize to use a third boost doses for only for these people with overweight people.
I see.
So I think that this is a really complicated issue, particularly because we are in an emergency to have enough doses of the vaccine for all over the world. So it means that really we need to careful design study to check overweight people. In conclusion, our study is most a warning bell, not for overweight patients, but for health workers and health people that we need to set up study on overweight people to detect different level of antibody before we think to change the schedule of vaccination.
Right. All right, Dr. Venuti, thank you very much for being with us live at this very early hour at your end with your insights.
Thanks for hearing me.
Right then, Dr. Dan, new findings by authorities here show 78 patients out of 100 maintain their naturally developed immunities for as long as 6 months. What are the implications of this reality with regard to achieving herd immunity here?
Well, so this study, these reports speak to the question of what is the durability of immunity after natural infection. And there have been a number of studies looking into this. There's a study in the US that found similarly that at the 6-month time point after symptoms due to COVID-19, the majority of participants in their study had maintained high levels of antibodies, T cells, and B cells. And of course, those are the laboratory components of what we consider the immune response. Importantly, there was another study in the UK called the Siren Study, in which they looked at how well previous infection protected against reinfection. And this was a study done among healthcare workers. And what they found was at 5 months, prior infection with COVID-19 protected at about 85% in terms of against reinfection. But they also found as part of this study, very importantly, that people who were reinfected had high levels of virus and they could potentially transmit the virus to other people. So even though they did not develop disease, they could still potentially infect other people. So In terms of your question, what does this mean in terms of herd immunity? I think looking forward, perhaps there might be a stacking effect. And so in the future, achieving herd immunity might become easier and easier as more and more people have different durations of immunity. But in terms of policy, this is going to be important in terms of determining who gets the booster, which booster, and when. In terms of timing, we may be looking at perhaps a 6-month time point, 9-month or 12-month time point in terms of either revaccination or delivering a booster. But I think overall, the news is reassuring in terms of at least for 3 months, people having had prior infection will have some degree of high natural immunity.
Right. Dr. Kim, I'm assuming people who receive vaccines will also be curious about the level of antibody they develop. Is there a way for them to easily find out?
I think people would probably would like to know my antibody level after vaccination. But as you know, even after just annual flu shot, we don't know how much antibody was actually generated in our bodies. And this is this is probably the same for this coronavirus vaccination as well. Maybe we can do some laboratory experiment. We can check the neutralization antibody levels. But commonly it is not known. And then based on some clinical trials, at least we know, and then we expect how much, how effectively our vaccination protect our body against some coronavirus infection. And also maybe testing neutralizing antibody is not just all that our vaccination can generate. The vaccination, depending on what kind of platform technology was used, the vaccination induces neutralizing antibody and also potentially some T-cell immunity, which we cannot actually measure in our hand easily at this moment. So we just got vaccination, we just wait and then just stay healthy. That's most important.
And just out of curiosity, Dr. Kim, how long do the current vaccines that we have available against COVID-19, how long do these antibodies that are developed by the vaccines stay within our bodies?
You mean after vaccination?
Yes.
Well, I'm not quite sure, but that's still just under some investigation. As I told you, even after the phase 3 clinical trial, that was actually terminated by end of the last year. So even not just the 6 months has actually have passed since the end of the phase 3 clinical trial. So we do not know for sure how long it will last. Right. We will see eventually.
As Dr. Dan has said before, there are more questions than answers here, right? Dr. Dan, senior citizens aged 75 and above will receive their first doses of the COVID-19 vaccine in the second quarter. How does this initiative look to affect Korea's containment efforts, vaccinating our senior citizens?
I hope that we see an effect as was seen in Scotland. So as many people know, in Scotland, as part of their mass national vaccination campaign, I think there were 650,000 people who received the AstraZeneca vaccine. 49,000 people received the first dose of the Pfizer vaccine, and they saw significant decreases in hospitalizations due to COVID-19 within 1 month. And so we will see a similar result. In the oldest of the old in our country, the case fatality ratio, so people greater than 80 years old, the case fatality ratio is about 21%. In people between the ages of 70 and 79, the case fatality ratio is 6.4%. Currently, of the 100 people who are critically or severely ill, 60% are age 70 or above. So certainly, we are hoping that including people over 75 as the first line recipients of the AstraZeneca vaccine, probably I think we're looking at the first week of April, that will have a significant impact in decreasing hospitalizations due to COVID-19.
Meanwhile, on the treatment front, Dr. Kim, I hear a second potential treatment for COVID-19 is awaiting approval from the local drug regulator. It's by Chonggundang. How does Chonggundang's potential treatment that is, compare to the one by Celltrion?
Well, actually, two different kind of drug, and the Celltrion is a monoclonal antibody, but this second one by the Chonggundang is actually the drug which was originally used for the treatment of pancreatitis. And then, so this is kind of just the outcome from the drug repositioning program. And then this one actually based on the some cell culture experiment, it actually showed a very potent antiviral efficacy. And this actually, but the target is a little bit different. Both monoclonal antibody, whether it is from the Celltrion or Eli Lilly or Regeneron, this actually just targets the viral spike protein. And so it actually inhibits the interaction between viral spike protein and the host receptor protein, which is ACE2. But then this napaveltan, which is actually nafamostat, it's actually targeting a TMPRSS2 protein. This protein is also, again, just a membrane protein and then involved in the virus entry. But two different proteins, whether it is a ACE2 spike or is just TMPRSS2 protein. So by just inhibiting this TMPRSS2 protein, the virus actually cannot penetrate into the host cell. So this drug actually effectively inhibits the viral fusion between the viral membrane and the host membrane. So different kind of mechanism, and also by just inhibiting just the host factor, in this case the TMPRSS2 protein, maybe this drug may be less susceptible to the variant viruses. But this, of course, this is waiting for some the final some experimental just evidence for that. And then I think this will just provide some additional just therapeutic option for the treatment. And currently there are some drugs currently available in Korea and also some in some foreign countries. And the first EUA was obviously remdesivir and also dexamethasone. And this is being used for some severe cases of COVID-19 patients. But I think a monoclonal antibody, and then this napaveltan is potentially used for some moderate patient, even some monoclonal antibody, maybe just the mild case of COVID-19, also depending on the risk. And then we can just administer such kind of thing to the patient with the mild or the moderate cases of COVID-19 patients.
Right. And Dr. Kim, do remind us about the importance of advances on the treatment front despite the presence of vaccines.
Well, I think this current vaccination is not available for just children less than the age 16 or 18, 8 years old. And also pregnant women are not actually getting just vaccination at the moment. And then there are some people with some immune compromise. So in this group of people are still just vulnerable to coronavirus, coronavirus infection as well. And even just the current vaccines are very effective, sometimes even more than 90% or so, but this is not 100% efficacy. So we need some backup as well.
Right. Meanwhile, Dr. Dan, quite a number of European countries have suspended the rollout of AstraZeneca vaccines amid safety concerns, reports of blood clots, actually. Now, the European Medicines Agency is investigating these reports and will announce their findings on Thursday. Now, they had earlier, that is, claimed that there is no link between AstraZeneca's vaccines and the reports of blood clots. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, let's back up a little bit. When Johnson & Johnson came out with their phase 3 trial results, and Johnson & Johnson's vaccine is also an adenovirus vector vaccine, they noted what they call a numerical imbalance in thromboembolic events, so blood clots, in people who received the vaccine versus people who did not receive the vaccine. So there were 15 cases of thromboembolic events in people who received the vaccine versus 10 in people who received the placebo. And they noted that the data were not enough to make any conclusions. But at that point, upon reading the report, I thought that this was something that we should keep an eye out for. And then after that, we started having reports of blood clots related to the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, we have to take this in perspective. So in the UK, they have a very, very robust monitoring system in place called their yellow card system. So anyone who has a side effect after a vaccine, they can report it giving a yellow card, kind of like what we call, a warning in soccer. And after 9.7 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, there were only 2 reports of blood coagulation problems and only 6 reports of lab abnormalities that could potentially lead to blood coagulation problems. And so, even though they have done this very, very intense monitoring, in the UK, just almost 10 million doses delivered, it hasn't really been shown to be a problem. Likewise, in Korea, we've had almost 588,000 first doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. no problems with blood clots so far. That being said, I think we do need to monitor very, very carefully the situation domestically. Also, listen very carefully to what's going on overseas, what the regulatory agencies are investigating overseas, and also the advice of the WHO. And then lastly, let our citizens know that the benefits still outweigh the risks of COVID-19 vaccine, and also emphasize that it's very important that people stay very well hydrated before the vaccination, on the day of vaccination, and make sure that if you do not feel well, if you do not have your baseline level of health on the day of vaccination, perhaps put it off until you do feel better, and then go and get your shot safely.
Right. And staying with possible post-inoculation adverse effects, Dr. Kim, in principle, how should we interpret, that is, these post-inoculation negative repercussions?
I think everything, as Dan said, I think everything is pretty much well documented in some previous clinical trials. So I think if there is any things, I mean, probably just authorities will just very closely just monitor just kind of side effects. And in the meantime, maybe government and others maybe will prepare some other just a program, like some compensation program for any kind of side effects, or like there seems to be some mild but some side effect issues. So that we can maybe implement some holiday, maybe just one day holiday after the vaccination. Maybe just make the people to get rest after vaccination.
Right, which is something that authorities are looking into, of course, right? All right, then. Thank you very much for your thoughts, Dr. Kim, and Dr. Dan. Thank you very much for your insights today. Right, the common stance among many medical experts, including our Dr. Dan, with regard to COVID-19 vaccination is that the gains outweigh the losses. Now, we'll be back with more coverage on the pandemic on Thursday. Thank you for watching.